both in? Here, wait. I'll come around. Yeah. Indeed. Like it's a like it's a delegation. Excellent. 1990s Hancock's. Yes. Not to meet you. Yes, it's here. Do you need this box here? You need this stuff? Yes. Ladies and gentlemen, good evening. Welcome to the Explorers Club. Welcome to our online viewers. My name is Stephen Schwankert. I'm the former chapter chair for East and South Asia. And that means that while I was in China for 25 years, I had the honor of getting to know tonight's speaker. So just a few titles that are now associated with his name. William Lindesay is an officer of the British Empire, 2006 OBE. He is a fellow of the Explorers Club. He's a member of the EC 50 from 2022. He received the Friendship Award in 1998 from then Chinese Premier Zhu Rongji. And he is an explorer, a geographer, a cartographer, a photographer, and a writer about the Great Wall of China. Somebody that we all wish we would become when we grew up. William was one of the first people that I was instructed to go meet when I was moving to Beijing in the early 90s. A mutual friend who had just rejected my book proposal suggested that I go out and find him. And at the time, he was living at the Friendship Hotel, which was at the sort of wrong end of Beijing. It was at the far end of Beijing, the you better take a taxi out there end of Beijing. And I met him and his lovely wife, Wu Qi, and their son, Jimmy, who was about knee-high at that point. And the reality is that William was already a legend by then. He was already someone that everyone associated with the Great Wall and its preservation and its conservation. And then a few years later, I got to go out on a cleanup with him, and I never imagined how much trash there would be on the Great Wall and how much we could have picked up in such a short time. But I also didn't realize the knowledge that this man had, his dedication to the wall, his understanding of its value, not just to China, but to all of humankind, and his absolute dedication to preserving it, and to researching it, and to advancing knowledge of it. So while every time coming to this podium is really a great privilege, tonight for me it's even a little bit more moving because I get to introduce my friend, William Lindesay. Please welcome William.
Well, thanks for that overwhelming introduction. I suppose I have to live up to the standards you've laid down there. First of all, an explanation of the wording here, the Great Wall of Two Williams. So you're going to hear about the Great Wall this evening, and you're going to hear about, I think you will agree, a remarkable destined meeting between two men named William who had a fascination for the Great Wall of China. From 2 journeys to 1 century mission, yes, amazingly, I conjured up a way we could collaborate and influence a better future for the Great Wall. Memorial presentation. So what's going on here? Well, one of the Williams, obviously not me, died 100 years ago in 1925. Not a happy occasion, but an opportunity for me to spearhead my campaign to have this forgotten American explorer be better remembered. The Explorers Club, July the 1st, 2025. I was here, I believe, in 2004. The centenary year of the club. July the 1st is a wonderful date for me to give this presentation because my father was born in Bay Ridge area of Brooklyn 110 years ago. Yeah. Thank you. Okay, let us begin. Well, in this presentation, you will be introduced to the history of the Great Wall. And then I want to tell you how I, growing up on the other side of the world from China, gravitated towards my destiny. And then I want to tell you how I managed a journey of almost 2,000 miles following the ruins of the Great Wall in the mid-1980s. And then quite soon after that, I was introduced to another William who had been to the Great Wall much earlier than I had. And then I'm going to tell you about his journey. And then I'm going to tell you how I had the brilliant idea of how we could work together. And then finally, I'm going to tell you about the results of our cooperation, a cooperation that is still moving forward. So hopefully back in a couple of years to give you the complete story. But first of all, some history. I think this was one of the earliest Great Wall photographs I saw, 1972. It's Richard Nixon visiting China at the start of China's attempt to normalize its relationship with the outside world. And this location has always been classic. Everyone wants to go there, from every president, king, ayatollah, to every tourist. But that is the tourist wall, and beyond the tourist wall, there is a different wall that's become known as Wild Wall. Wild being the short form of wilderness, because this describes the wall that has fallen into ruins during the last 4 centuries. It's been overgrown with bushes and trees, and it really shows you how an attempt to create a building just becomes too much to maintain. Nature takes over, right? So the wall that you have probably been to, seen, read about in your books is the wall of the Ming Dynasty. I don't know how good you are on Chinese dynasties, you know, Ping Pong, Ting Tang, Yin Yong. Yeah, okay, but the Ming, 1368 to 1644, this is a very special wall because it is evolving immediately after Genghis Khan and his family conquered the whole of China in the 1200s. So this was a wall built to stop another Genghis Khan type invasion, and it's the Great Wall as the world knows it today. And it looks different along its east to west geographical span. This is the same age wall, but it's obviously in a desert, semi-desert area. The builders had to use what was available, so you have a wall with a totally different morphology. Now, earlier this century, the Chinese government sent out surveyors and archaeologists, and they gave us a figure for the length, findable length, of the Ming Dynasty Great Wall on the landscape of China today. An amazing 8851 kilometers, 5,500 miles. However, before the Ming Dynasty Great Wall, at least 15 other dynasties built long defense structures in the northern parts of their empires that we Great Wall researchers regard as Great Walls of China. This is a map produced by the survey team. And you can see those lines towards the top of the China map. The important thing is just to appreciate these walls are still there. You go back in time, you can still find them. They're what I call miracle sections. And this is the beginning. This wall was the wall masterminded by Emperor Qin Shi Huang. I'm sure his terracotta warriors have been either to New York or DC in the last 50 or so years since they started to be unearthed. So this is a splendid section. As I said, I haven't said yet, yeah, it's dating from the late 3rd century BC. This is a little bit younger, and it's quite remarkable because in the construction you can see there's a lot of branches. And this wall is very special in that it was built in an area what is now known as the Silk Road. So this wall was built to protect commerce on the Silk Road. And it dates from approximately 110 BC. Now the next picture I'm going to show you, if you were there in the broad light of midday, you wouldn't even notice there is a wall there, but this is taken just before the sun goes down. And you can see on the left there's a mound, and in the middle, on the left there's a trench, in the middle there's a mound. So this was obviously a much higher structure, but it was made of earth. And erosion and the movement of animals, especially gazelle in this area, have eroded it immensely. But it is regarded as not a Great Wall of China, but a Great Wall outside China, because it exists in the top northeastern corner of the Republic of Mongolia. Okay, so you have a bit of background, and now I want to tell you how William Lindesay became interested in the Great Wall. Well, I had a very good start in life. I was born in Wallasey. Isn't that strange? No one's ever heard of Wallasey, but I think many of you over the age of 60 remember a band, a contemporary band of the Beatles, Jerry and the Pacemakers, and their most famous song is Ferry Cross the Mersey. Yeah. So here we have the River Mersey, and here we have the Wirral Peninsula, and I grew up right there in that corner. I went to school there. I lived basically the first 20 years of my life there. And I went to a very small prep school, St. Aidan's. This is my class. My headmaster's there on the left. You can see his occupation. He was hauled in because the founder of the school was 85. She couldn't handle the boys and girls, so she left Mackie, as we nicknamed him, to educators. And he told us, by your bedside, you should have a Bible, a prayer book, and an atlas. And I loved looking at my atlas. This isn't the actual atlas, but it was printed at that same time. I bought it on eBay. And this is the map that triggered my Great Wall dream, because as soon as I saw that battlement-like symbol snaking across the map, I tried to work out the length, not to gain some general knowledge, but because I decided there and then that evening that when I grow up, I want to go to China and explore the Great Wall from end to end. And of course, like most childhood dreams, this one was forgotten. In my teens, I wanted to be a zoologist, then an Egyptologist, but I ended up being a geologist. But actually, I really like running. My two brothers and I, the Lindsays, we hold the one-generation record for the London Marathon. 3 family members, 2:27, 2:39, 2:59. We got somewhat fed up running city marathons, and my brother Nick in 1984 said, Will, how about we run along Hadrian's Wall? I'm sure many of you have been to the north of England and you've caught sight of the Roman fortifications in that area. There's a map up top there. It stretches across the northern part of Britain from Newcastle to beyond Carlisle. And I should tell you, this is the first manipulated and only manipulated photograph in my whole presentation. Because I'm a good photographer, I took that great picture of Nick in the rather gaudy yellow tracksuit bottoms, and he's a hopeless photographer. He's probably watching now in Britain. That's just a joke, Nick. But yeah, William behind, he's photoshopped in. Yeah, right. But anyway, just after these photographs were taken, we stopped for a chocolate bar and a drink, and Nick said, "Hey, Will, you should go to China and explore the Great Wall." And the timing was perfect. It was 1984. A bit of background political history. Chairman Mao Zedong died in 1976. Within 2 years, Deng Xiaoping became the paramount leader, and he wanted to make China part of the world. So that journey that I had mentioned in class, that my headmaster Mackie had doubted was possible because he said there's a revolution, you know, and people don't go to China. It was possible now, 1984. And what's more, I was the perfect age, late 20s. I had no loves or loans or little uns to hold me back. So I thought, I'm going. I want to be the first foreigner to make a journey on foot along the Great Wall. So I'm pretty fit, and I toughen up my mind with runs in the Peak District and the Lake District and just running morning, noon and night. But I lack 2 skills. 1, I can't use chopsticks. Solved here. 2, I can't speak Chinese. And his daughter taught me how to say, "Hello, I'm British," in Cantonese, which is not very widely spoken in the north of China, where you find the Great Wall. So anyway, I arrived in China for the first time in March 1986. And I think many explorers at this podium will have spoken of their triumphs and their failures. My failure I have redesigned as an apprenticeship. 1986 was my China apprenticeship. Yeah. I realized what the real challenge was. It's not going to be distance. It's not going to be making friends with the Chinese people. It's going to be the politics. Okay, so I set off from Beijing, and if you imagine this is a map of China, I'm going to set off halfway across the country to the left to a place called Jiayuguan in Gansu province. So if you're living in New York, my geography of the US is not that good, but it would be like heading off on a train to somewhere like Montana or Wyoming. And back in those days, it took about 60 hours. So similar. Huh? And here I began my journey at the very western end of the Ming Wall. And you may be thinking, where's the wall? There it is, made of rammed earth. And they've built it here to this cliff edge, so that gorge becomes part of the defense. It's called borrowing the landscape. So I began my journey here, and I had sponsors, and I had to get a photograph back to them. I spent an hour, a whole film, taking a photograph, and I got this fairly reasonable one. But what I want to say is it took more than 2 months for this photograph to get back to Britain and appear in the British newspapers. And there's one of the appearance it made, putting promise into practice. Because I told my best friend Simon at the Horse and Jockey in Manchester, I'm going to China to run the Great Wall. And he said, "Oh, wonderful. If anyone can do it, it's you. But I heard there's a lot of bureaucracy in China. Red tape." So I start on my journey, and I've changed my logistical plan. I'm by myself. I'm not carrying much, and I find sleeping out with just cold water and rock-hard bread to eat is miserable. There's 11 hours of darkness. I change the plan and I start to knock on the doors of remote farmsteads and say, Ni hao, wo shi Yingguoren. Chang Chang, Jiao Yi Guan Dao Shanghai Guan. Yeah. And people were not, oh, come in, have a cup of tea. It was all very cautious, but with sign language, a lot of smiling, I got food, water, and shelter. And this family, I call them my patron saints of hospitality in China. They were my turning point. They were so warm-hearted. They sheltered me when a blizzard struck in the night and prevented me from leaving. This is taken on the second morning when I did leave. And I made my way up into those foothills, looked around, and I could see the family of 4 with Yin Lan Lan's bright orange jacket still visible about 5 miles in the distance. And I thought I'd never see them again. Okay, as we travel along the wall, as I did on foot, in 1987, on my 3rd attempt, I want to tell you why this wall was built and why the other 15 walls before it were built. And it's because people had different lifestyles on different landscapes. Quite frankly, China in ancient times, it would be top of that list, you know, that The Economist puts out, the most livable countries. It was top of the charts. Yeah. Chinese civilization flourished more than 4,000 years ago. They had great land. They worked hard together. They irrigated the land. They protected the land from flooding by building dikes along the rivers, like the Yellow River. And they reached a level of good living at a very early stage that allowed a lot of people to do other things rather than just work to grow food. They produced things. Utility, beautiful, aesthetic, mysterious. Their land was good, yeah. But way north of China, there's a wild landscape north of the Gobi Desert. The steppe, mountain, and more desert. And the people up there, originally hunters, they became herders. And they lived well. Lots of meat, lots of cheese, lots of milk. But every now and then, a drought, a disease, and sometimes a zud, an animal famine winter. And we believe from round about 500 BC, nomads in desperation on their horses, they traveled south, crossed the Gobi Desert, and trespassed on Chinese land. And the Chinese couldn't handle them because they were mainly engaged with chariot and infantry warfare, and these nomads came as cavalry because they were hunters. They were able to use the bow and arrow skillfully from the back of a galloping horse. And so the Chinese decided the only way to handle these enemies was not engage them in open field warfare, but to build a wall, to create high ground, which was key in the era of cold weapons warfare. Okay, so I foot-slogged across China, and you might, until this sign appeared, be thinking, well, William is being welcomed by the Chinese people and he's seeing great landscapes. Okay, well, let's ramp up the drama. When I was in China at this time, there were just 325 places, dots on the map, that were open to foreigners. Everywhere else was closed. And actually, this was my biggest challenge. The distance was not a big problem to me. And on my successful journey, I was stopped, I think I can say arrested by the police 9 times. I was saved literally by an act of God, a massive sandstorm that allowed me to escape. But I didn't get out of that province. The police nabbed me again, and they were not very happy. They detained me for a week. They confiscated my films. I had to write a self-criticism, and they gave me a deportation order, get out of China within 7 days. And I did, And I went to Hong Kong, I renewed my passport there, and I re-entered China to continue my journey in the autumn, making my way across China from west to east in the mountains. And here I realized I had a great story to tell. I've seen a lot of war. I've had a lot of meetings with the police, so there's the real political adventure component there. And I'm thinking maybe I have a book to write. I'd never written much before in my life. So I spent another hour here, and it got on the front cover. But it wasn't the most important photograph I took on my Great Wall journey. This was the most important. Not a great wall. I mean, it's pretty beaten up. There's wall there, but where are those signature structures, those towers, where the guards were garrisoned? Ah. The editor insisted it went in the book because it had snow. I said, no, Margaret, there are much better photos. She said, no, we'll have that in. The book came out in 1989. I don't know whether you remember that year, but in June there was a lot of chaos in Beijing and throughout the whole of China. And my editor phoned me on June the 5th and said, William, I think we're going to have to postpone. And I said, no, my wife and I are going to return to China. We'd like to stick with the publication date of November 89, and we did. And in doing so, the publisher sent me and my wife on a publicity tour. There was money for that behind books in those days. But anyway, here we have a map showing the Ming Wall, and I'm starting over there in Jiayuan. Is that the Jiayuan here? And I was deported from here, and then I rejoined the wall up here and terminated my journey there. And yeah, so we go on the publicity tour, and I let the cat answer the bag there because I mentioned wife. So here we have the romantic aspects of my journey. In the course of being deported, I met my wife-to-be. So I do have the Chinese police to thank for that. The British press were not that interested in the Great Wall, but they loved the love story. Yeah. This is a screenshot from the then most popular TV program on BBC, the chat show called Wogan. Any Brits here? Yeah. Do you remember Wogan? Yeah. Okay. So, as a result of this press blitz, I received this letter. You can read it yourself. It's from Marjorie Hessel-Tiltman, and probably had she not written this letter, I wouldn't be talking about this tonight, because she sent me a book called The Great Wall of China. And she wrote, perhaps it's too late to be of use. And this is the book I unwrapped in 1991. And immediately I felt crestfallen, because I thought with my 2,500 kilometer journey, I thought I was William the Conqueror. But I realized a blooming American had got there before me. And I was William II. But after an hour or two, as I perused the book, I came across a photograph that was half familiar. And the reason it was half familiar was half of what was there had gone by the time I was there. 79 years difference. This is what might be called coincidental rephotography. And the book was written by William Edgar Geil. I want to tell you now about his journey. He first went to China to sail down the Yangtze River. And this book, whether you've been in China for 10 days or 10 years, it's amusing and informative. And then he went back for the Great Wall in 1908. And he hadn't been to the wall before. We know that because he received photographs of the wall, a reply to a request from a British diplomat in St. Petersburg. And he set off from Doylestown. Have you heard of Doylestown? Yeah, it's about 2 hours drive from here. He set off from Doylestown, and after 61 days travel, railroad across the US, steamer ship to the Chinese coast via Honolulu and Yokohama, he arrived at where the Great Wall meets the sea, here. And he began his journey from here. And he definitely relied on the local people for guidance, for hospitality. And he made his way with a mule train, 7 or 8 Chinese helpers, and seemingly always someone, a local foreigner, maybe something to do with the church, the China Inland Mission. That was his web of contacts. And he made his way from east to west along the Great Wall. And just on the horizon there is a fortress that marks the western end of the Great Wall. And he arrived there on August 21st, 1908. There wasn't room for him in the fortress proper, so he had to make do with, like, the Comfort Inn just outside. No one here working for Comfort Inn. Okay, sorry about that. Yeah. Okay, and he published his book. He publishes his book on both sides of the Atlantic. John Murray in London, Sturgis and Walton here in New York. And the US edition has a much more beautiful cover. And he really becomes the man of the hour, the man of the day. After arriving back in the US, he was ushered down to Washington, D.C. to see the then president, President Taft. He reported that since he was in China for his Yangtze River journey, 5 years had passed by, and he was amazed at the progress. I'm sure Stephen would agree. 5 years in China is like 50 or 70 years elsewhere in the world. Always high-speed change. William Geil returned to China on 2 more occasions. One, to investigate the 18 ancient capitals of the dynasties. And then finally, the 5 sacred mountains. And then he went back to Doylestown. Here, William Geil and I differ, because I returned to China with my wife, Wu Ti, who is here today, standing at the side there, taking splendid photographs, I hope. Thank you. I returned to China not to be the most awesome guide for tours along the whole length of the Great Wall, because no one was going to China after 1989. I realized that 1993 would be the centenary of Mao Zedong's birth, so I thought, that's a great sequel. Great Wall, Long March. So these badges that the Chinese wore during the Cultural Revolution, they inspired this journey along the route of the Red Army's Long March and to every place in Chairman Mao's life. But after 3 years of all that, Communist Party history and politics, I produced a book, I learned a lot, but I was eager to get back to the wall, and it's by bicycle. And bicycle is both the make and break of the next phase of the story. I'm visiting the Wild Wall, the Wilderness Wall in the Beijing area, and the Beijing area is roughly the size of New Jersey. But the difference is there's 320 miles of Ming Dynasty Great Wall par excellence. And it looks like this. It's the Wild Wall. But as I was going to the wall, I became concerned about its future. There weren't many people going to the wall in those days because the car industry had only just begun. But I foresaw a disaster coming. I once saw photographers with very classy equipment, Hasselblads and really expensive equipment, just opening films and leaving the wrappers on the ground. So I organized the first ever cleanup of the Great Wall with 100 volunteers. And I think that's the first time I met a certain Stephen. Who's that guy on the left? Yeah. Yeah. Okay. And from being the most famous foreign garbage collector in China, I decided I needed to do more. So I thought we need green message signage. And I continued to be fascinated by old photographs because I realized they could show change. Now, this is the make of the next stage of my Great Wall life. Because a colleague, I was working for China Daily at the time, she said, "Oh, William always goes to the Great Wall, that's very boring." And she said, her English was very good, "Your wife will become a Great Wall widow." Yeah. So I thought I better come up with a plan to involve my wife and then little boy, Jimmy, who's actually been here in 2004, age 10, to involve them in my Great Wall passion. And this was the answer. I spotted this derelict farmhouse. We bought it for the princely sum of 10,000 yuan, which was about $1,500 at the time. And the Great Wall was right outside my door. I had a piece of history and heaven just 1 mile up through the forest. And as I left this house on the eve of the millennium, I took a trail from the farmhouse here up to the wall here to drink a bottle of champagne with a few friends. And as I went up the trail, I thought how different going up to the wall at night, midnight, was from dawn. No lightening of the sky in the east, but light pollution coming from Beijing in the south, and making the windows of the towers look like eyes viewing my approach. And I wondered what they had seen in the last few centuries, the 1500s, the arrival of 16, 17, 18, 1900, and shortly 2000. And I feared what they would see in the next century, even the next 10 years, was going to be catastrophic. Because all the talk from our farmer neighbors was, the developers are coming in. They're going to oust the farmers. We're going to get compensation. We're going to be in the money. We're going to live in a high-rise in the town. Yeah, and I thought, this is going to be disastrous, because I viewed the Great Wall as a landscape, the wall, the surroundings, the villages, and the people, a cultural landscape. And it's at that time, just before midnight, the penny dropped. I thought I could actively go out and seek where William Geil had taken his photographs, produce updates, and put the two photos side by side to show China, the Great Wall community, the government, how much the Great Wall had changed in the 1900s, in the hope we could do better in the 21st century. And so the coincidental rephotography triggered the idea of systematic rephotography. And it was detective work. I took scans to villages. Old folks gave me pointers. And I basically used spring and autumn seasons, these times of the year when there was good light, from 2003 to 2007. And I produced 150 high-quality pairs of old and new photographs. And these are some of mainly William Geil's photographs taken in 1908. So that's the old photograph, top left. And you can see it's a color picture. It's actually a magic lantern slide. He would have used pictures like that here in New York. I know he spoke at the American Geographical Society. I'm not sure whether he spoke here. Maybe we can consult the archives. Okay, so in some places, the comparisons, there's hardly any difference, remarkably, after 100 years. But eventually, I'm going to come to some heartbreaking discoveries. This is what I call the low-hanging fruit. These are locations I learned William Geil had passed by right outside our farmhouse. Yeah. This place, I often take my guests to, and I give a 15-minute talk about William Geil right there. I've done that more than 500 times. This is the same tower, looking in a different direction. Yeah, the same tower. Yeah. Yeah. This is wall that's been rebuilt, and I met Nancy in the gathering over there, and she showed me a picture of visiting this wall on the right. Yeah, it's been rebuilt. Well, we need rebuilt wall. I mean, everyone in China wants to see the Great Wall. Yeah. Now, this picture is getting interesting. Yeah, we can see how William Geil progressed along the wall. And I was here about 2 months ago, and in that tower, there is a plaque which tells you in Chinese that William Edgar Geil from Doylestown, Pennsylvania, passed through this area in 1908 and took this photograph. Not much change, but the plaque over the doorway dating the construction of that tower had disappeared. Okay. This was William Geil's favorite photograph. We know that because he put it on the cover of his book. But when I got there, it had deteriorated a lot. It couldn't be called the picturesque pass because it had been demolished, apparently by local Chinese farmers ordered as prisoners of the Japanese invaders to destroy the towers. I said, why did they want you to do that? They said, because the Japanese knew that the Great Wall was a great symbol of Chinese culture. Yeah. Yeah. This really was investigation photography, and this old grandfather, as we call him in China, Liu Wentai, he was a great help in helping me find the sister towers side by side. So we'll be seeing those towers in a moment. But this is where William Geil finished his historic journey, 81 days. So this is the first ever journey by anyone from any country. When I'm in China, I say, even including Chinese. And many people have said, why do you think William Geil from Doylestown, Pennsylvania was the first person to make a journey along the wall? And it's easy to answer. Chinese living beside the wall saw it every day. They thought it was ordinary. William Geil, like me, had been attracted to the Great Wall by a map. We know that because the opening lines of this book read, there is a Great Wall of China, so the geographies tell us, but they do not make it clear whether it's made of stone or of China, how long it is or how long it has been. Yeah, 81 days. Also, the first ever book about the Great Wall in any language. That is amazing. And here he is, entering the fortress. He's got the white helmet on. And this is the fortress at the far northwest frontier of the Ming Empire. And I'm sure many of you can't read these characters, but remember this segment of the story, because you can see these characters. You don't have to go 8,000 miles across the world to see these characters. You can find them much closer. Okay, remember William Geil's journey began where the wall meets the ocean. It's quite a dramatic location, seeing those blocks in the ocean. Yeah. What about this western end? It looks like an anticlimax, doesn't it? Great big mound of mud. That's the remains of a tower, not one of those towers with hollow space that you see close to Beijing. This is just solid, high platform for observation. But William Geil must have felt the same excitement and emotions as I felt when I went there for the first time in 1986. Because just beyond that tower, there's a canyon. And that, as you know, is a good place to end your man-made defense, because it merges with a natural defense. And, okay. So William Geil has inspired me to collect vintage photographs, and I included these in my work. This was easy to find, of course, but I'm coming to the difficult one here. 2 towers side by side. So this is the iconic view of the wall, but it's what? Double vision, stereo vision, 2 towers side by side. It's unprecedented. I couldn't believe this photograph when I first obtained it. And the old gentleman, grandfather Liu Wentai, took me a few hundred meters from his home and said, "That's it." And I said, "What?" Couldn't believe it. But the good news is that tower has now been rebuilt on the basis of how they appeared in that vintage photograph. The oldest photograph I worked with was this, 1871, taken by the Scottish photographer John Thompson. And it's on the way to Badaling Great Wall, you know, where all the presidents and kings go. And still today, millions and millions of tourists go there. Immense changes, of course. Okay, so I've found William Geil's Great Wall, but I'm wondering what's happened to William Geil. I start to write to institutions in America saying I'm looking for William Geil's original expedition records, and I'm drawing blanks all the time. No one knows much about this man. It becomes a complete mystery until 2008. I've done loads of work, and 2008 I decide is going to be the end of the project, and I have to end it well. Olympic year. People are asking me to escort their groups, their companies to the wall. The bank account is looking reasonable. I'm thinking, I'm going to siphon off a few $1,000s. Don't tell the wife. I'm going to get on a plane, travel to Doylestown, lay a wreath at his grave, maybe put an ad in the local paper asking, does anyone know anything about William Edgar Geil, born 1865, died 1925. And then, through my research, I found William Geil's grandsons. And I got this email reply from Bob Laycock saying, "You found the right family. It's my brother John, who's the historian. Contact him." And we would meet very shortly. The second breakthrough was because of the web presence of the Wall of Two Williams. I got an email from Tim Adamski of Doylestown Historical Society saying, we've been donated a stack of boxes belonging to a local explorer, and one of the boxes has China written on it, and in the box there are many papers, handwritten, typed, newspaper cuttings, all about the Great Wall. And I Googled you and found out what you and William Geil have been doing together to show changes. So I traveled to Doylestown in 2008, which was the centenary of William Geil's journey, and visited the house he built, partly on the success of his talks. I mean, you know, talks pay very well, don't they, Stephen? Yeah, yeah. And also, I think, good choice of wife. Beautiful and rich. Yeah. And here, anyway, jokes aside, this calligraphy, yes, I'll ask Chi to read it. And this one? Yeah. So this calligraphy you find on a stone overlooking the Yellow Sea in the east, where the wall meets the sea. And that's William Geil's photograph of it. And that's the, that's the calligraphy at the west end of the wall that you find at Jiayiguan. And the three gentlemen here are the grandsons of William Geil. Yeah, there's Father John on the far left, who sadly passed away just a few months ago, and then In the middle, that's Bob, the youngest, and Brad. And just this last weekend, my wife, Chi, and I, we made a journey to Michigan to meet the brothers there. Okay, so those the other stelae, as that we call them. That's the one at the far end of the west end of the wall, Jiaiguan. And those are the tin boxes. Those are North China. That was the treasure trove, full of papers like this. There were maps. This is one of my favorites from his notebook. So it's basically the accounts for the mule train from Shanhaiquan. So that's where the wall meets the sea, to Nankou. So that's the wall just north of Beijing. So this is the first 3 weeks of his journey, and it's cost an extortionate 88 something. And good American tradition, a tip, $3.96, money well spent. I think this was one of the gems in the box because it allowed me to fill in the gaps that all books naturally have, because editors are always cutting things down. So on the far left, we have the transliteration of the place names he passed through. We got the Chinese characters. We got the distance in li. That's a Chinese unit of measurement. And we've even got the dates. So that really was a revelation. And all kinds of jottings on the height of the wall and the breadth and the width. And finally, a banquet at the end of his journey in the fortress, thrown by the mayor. And William Geil has written down the dishes, and he's quite intrigued by them. And I think those of you who've spent time in China will probably be able to kind of convert those. There's the chicken in oil, that's probably the Kung Pao chicken, yeah? But William makes a note, I think I'll give the sea cucumber a miss. 2,000 miles from the ocean, yeah. No refrigeration, huh? Yeah, yeah. Okay, so he's really created history. William Geil being the first person to make a journey along the Great Wall. But I think my partnership with him turned William Geil from history into a conservation partner, because the two Williams story really struck it off with the Chinese press and media. This is the Chinese edition of the National Geographic magazine. And we got great support from the Beijing government. They offered us a venue in a new museum in Olympic year to tell this story. And all the dignitaries attended. The eminent Professor Lord Gerin and the British ambassador, the State Administration for Cultural Heritage, legal director, and Beatrice from UNESCO, and the External Affairs Director of Shell. Yeah, the guided tours were great, but the most rewarding visits for me were when I went down there quietly and just sat and observed the people, the ordinary people, viewing our exhibition. And I heard several times Chinese standing in front of these photographic pairs and sighing. They would go, "Oh, two foreigners have shown us how the Great Wall has deteriorated. It's not such good quality now. Oh, we should do more." That's exactly what we were aiming to do. We were aiming to introduce a feeling of regret, in the hope that regret would move minds and tell muscles for people, the Great Wall community, local governments, the provinces that have the Great Wall, to do something now to make the future better. Because, as you know, the best time to plant a tree is 20 years ago. Yeah. The exhibition has been shown in, to date, 13 locations across China, and this is an outdoor version. And some of the venues were surreal. This is the place I was imprisoned, locked in my room for 1 week. It was the place I was deported from because it was closed. It became open to the world on the basis of natural gas discoveries, and they made me an honorary citizen. Yeah. They even wanted to give my wife and I an apartment. Yeah, and the show was in the town square. This was also a very surreal venue. This is where I began my Great Wall journey. This is where William Geil finished his Great Wall journey. And a version of this exhibition is still running at Jiaoyuguan. I saw it a couple of months ago. First book about the Great Wall, written by foreigners, translated into Chinese and published in China. Okay, so I believe William Geil's journey was predestined. Yeah, he has become extremely well known in China. He's known as Lao William. I meet people up on the Great Wall and they say, "Oh, you and Lao William from America, you have the same name. Are you the same family?" No, not quite. But it's very nice we have the same names. There's the Chinese edition. That's my translated edition. 2008, this is the gathering of the brothers. This is the discovery of the contents of the box, and some of the elders of the town and the owner of the Geil mansion, Steve Osborne on the far right, who sadly passed away last year. And that magnificent house in Doylestown, with all its historical contents and beautiful design features of Chinese, Greek origin, is on the market for just over 2 million, and there's no certainty it can be preserved. So if you have a bit of extra cash, you're interested in furthering the cause of a forgotten American explorer, now's the time to spring some coin. Yeah, okay. Well, one thing I was really shocked about William Geil's grave was the lack of any hint at what he had done. I mean, we all hope that the subtraction between these two dates is going to be a big number. You know, living for a long time, there's a preoccupation with that. But I think it's how you spend your time, the contents of this dash, which is most important. And that's why in 2008 we produced this plaque. And if you go there today, you will see it. But anyway, I made a short speech beside William Geil's grave. I said, William, you are the first explorer of the wall, the first one to write a book about it. You are, in fact, the father of Great Wall studies. Thank you for everything you have taught us. That's the plaque mounted on a piece of Vermont granite. If you go to Doylestown today, you will see it. I took the book that triggered this whole journey, this whole project with me. And when I got it back to Beijing, I thought, I think we need to add a few sentences. So I picked up my pen and wrote that. I included William Geil's book in my selection of 50 objects that tell important episodes of the Great Wall's history. Yeah. And I'm here today. This presentation is the last of a series I've been giving to mark the centenary of William Geil's death. I began at the Yale Center in Beijing with a presentation, a test run, and then we came over to Doylestown a couple of weeks ago, gave a talk at Doylestown Historical Society, presenting all the books with William Geil related content to the director, Daria. We held a gathering at the cemetery, and I made a memorial speech. And then this last weekend, as I've already said, Chi and I went up to Michigan to meet Brad in the center there and Bob to talk about the family history. So that's about as far as the Great Wall of Two Williams story goes today. I know, I'm certain, a magnificent final episode is yet to be revealed. Watch this space within 2 years. Great revelations. Thank you so much for joining me tonight. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And I think now we're going to have a Q&A session, if you would like. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah. Because you've been a highly appreciative audience, it's just like you've finished your mains, so you can have a dessert, right? So we have a short film, it's like 2 minutes. 10 years ago, when DJI commercial drones hit the market, to celebrate my 30th anniversary of arriving in China for the Great Wall, me, my wife Chi, and our sons Jimmy and Tommy, we flew the Great Wall for 60 days, because that year I was 60 years old. And the documentary that was created from that summer of flying has been shown in more than 50 countries. But tonight, we're just showing you the taster, after which we will have the Q&A session. So if the technical team can get that set up, we can enjoy a bird's eye view of the Great Wall of China from east to west. I've often lay down to rest, looking up at clouds or a gliding hawk, and imagined their views. Since 1986, I've walked the Great Walls of China for 2,500 days. To mark my 30th year in China, my family is embarking on a new, dreamlike journey of discovery. En route, my sons, James and Thomas, will fly to give me a bird's eye view of the Great Wall that, without doubt, is the greatest of views.
Anyone have any questions for William? was looking at all of this, I was wondering who built it? How was it built? How were they fed? And also, once it was built, how did they maintain people in the towers? And who were the hairy pygmies that Geil talked about?
Oh, there's a lot of questions there.
Yes, all related to the people.
Yes. Well, how it was built, that question everyone asks, especially when they see it, is a requirement for any wonder of the world. You stand in front of the Great Pyramid, Taj Mahal, Petra, wherever. It's how did they do this? But I must admit, the experience of the Great Wall is slightly different. All of those other buildings, they have their amazing qualities. The Great Pyramid is 4,650 years old. It was the highest building in the world until the French built the Eiffel Tower. It's not featured on maps of the world. No, it's too small. But since 1590, the Great Wall has been featured as a landscape feature on maps of the world. Cornelis de Roda, 1590, in Antwerp. That's a world map, looks like the world. There's a battlement and a town. And I was in DC, I don't know, a number of years ago, I bought a globe, still on there. The difference is the Great Wall of China is not just history, it's geography. It's a landscape feature. Rather like a river, a high mountain, an ocean to cross, it's attracted adventurers sooner or later. Actually quite late. William Geil, William Lindesay. How did they build it? Well, the Ming Dynasty Great Wall was built very professionally because earlier Great Wall construction projects were disastrous. The first Great Wall of the Qin, for example, was built by corvée laborers. They were route marched from the then capital, 500 miles to the north, across wild territory, and then they were left to build the wall. But there was no food production in this frontier area. They started to die at the start of winter. A legend retells the hardship and the suffering this led to. And actually, after the Qin dynasty, in Chinese history, on any materials, you hardly find the Chinese characters Changcheng because of the deaths the tyrannical emperor Qin Shi Huang caused with his logistical no concern for the welfare of the people. It just became a place of no return, a death sentence. In the Ming Dynasty, for example, they'd build a section of wall throughout the spring or the autumn when the seasons were quite agreeable, and then to mark the completion, they'd put a tablet about half the size of this frame in the wall. And those tablets tell us who was in charge of quarrying. And the rank of the military official gives us an idea how many military families he was responsible for. So basically, in the Ming Dynasty, in an area like this, 100 yards of wall is the manpower effort of round about 3,500 to 5,000 people working from sunrise to sunset, and maybe even more, for about 12 or 14 weeks in spring and autumn. And it continued throughout the Ming Dynasty. The Ming Dynasty Great Wall is the world's most labor-intensive, material-consuming and time-consuming building project in history. Yeah. And on average, 750,000 military personnel, military families, men, women, children, were living down in the valley on the inside building the wall. That means the Ming Dynasty Great Wall of China is the result of at least 200 million man-years of labor. Yeah. Yeah. That's the difference between the Great Wall and the Pyramid, Machu Picchu, Christ the Redeemer, Taj Mahal, Colosseum, so on and so on and so on. They all have their qualities, but the Great Wall, geographical feature. Thank you.
What would you say is the biggest threat to the Great Wall today?
I'm glad you asked that question because I'm very optimistic. This Great Wall Conservation Project of rephotography, I think, was a milestone. And at about that time, the government surveyed the wall. So this was an essential piece of work to find the wall and measure the extant lengths of all the strands. But I was very pessimistic back then. But conservation of the Great Wall has not only appeared on the agenda of the State Bureau for Cultural Relics, I would say it's right at the top. My wife and I have been amazed at the meetings we've been to in recent years and the work that's being done. They are creating a chain of national parks because, you know, the Great Wall is fragmented. They have identified the most excellent sections of walls from various dynasties. And they have also come up with the concept of the Great Wall Cultural Belt. Because although this is the primary source for study, you can work out through the archaeology, the logistics of construction, the storytelling, you have to dig deeper for that. And you need a museum environment. You need objects, and they discover objects. My Great Wall book, Great Wall in 50 Objects, no one had ever done that before, and I'm urging every province to do their own provincial version, not 50, but 100. So I'm really optimistic now. China is highly respective, highly values its cultural heritage. It's a new era that I honestly didn't think I would live to see. Thank you.
So the drone preview that you showed us, is there a full-length film, and where can we see it if there is?
Until now, no, but very soon, yes. My YouTube channel called The Great Wall 100, Wild Wall. This winter, we're going to segment the film. The whole film is about 50 minutes long. It covers about 16 or 18 locations. So we're going to cut it up and put each region up there. And I think soon the whole film. But unfortunately, with copyright regulations, it's quite difficult to find. And if it's up there, it tends to get taken down. Yes. Yeah. Thank you.
Well, don't you have the copyright if the footage is yours?
Yeah. But, you know, we've been waiting, when should we do that? Should we actually only show the whole film at our place beside the wall. It's a small attraction, but I think it's time to put it out there to let it get a worldwide audience. Thank you for the reminder, and I'll make sure I do that.
Did you have any, in the times I've been there, I've never studied the acts of the people that were outside the wall trying to come in and invade China, but there's no literature that I'm aware of, but were there battles that were fought on the wall? Was it designed for the purpose of keeping the enemy out, or was it just simply there and it prevented anything from happening?
Good question. I touched upon the reasons for the wall in the presentation. Basically, different landscapes, different lifestyles, different levels of productivity. Basically, the Chinese are prospering. They've got the best land. And the people to the north, we generally call them the nomadic cultures, they're struggling because every now and then they're getting hit by a disaster. A drought or a disease or one of these terrible winters. So the last Zud animal famine winter, I think, was 2003 in Mongolia. It hardly made any news. 2.5 million head of livestock died. So imagine in history that happening. People were forced to go somewhere. They couldn't go to the neighboring nomadic clan 50 miles that way because they'd be fighting them for donkey's years, and they've suffered the same disaster. The only possible relief was, if their horses survived, get on their horses. Which direction? Not north to Siberia, south towards the warmth. But they had to cross the Gobi Desert. But once they crossed the Gobi Desert, confidence built. It's like, you know, the first 4-minute mile, and then suddenly, you know, it's like every year there's a few people breaking the 4-minute mile, that kind of thing. But, you know, as the centuries rolled on, incursions, attacks south for relief from some kind of disaster changed into well-planned military attacks. The tribes of the steppe became federated, and under the charisma of certain leaders, they struck China with the purpose of defeating the Chinese army, staying on Chinese land and harnessing the native Han Chinese people and their productivity. Yeah. Did I answer your question?
Well, was it successful?
Oh, yeah, yeah. So the easiest way to understand the theory of the Great Wall is the Chinese cannot compete with their nomadic enemies in archery or flight archery. Flight archery is using the bow and arrow from the back of a horse. In the early days, the Chinese only had infantry and chariots. So when the nomadic people from the north came with these great skills honed from childhood, you know, if you go to Mongolia today, you see children of 4 or 5 with miniature bows very patiently waiting for a marmot to come out of a hole. And that's much more difficult than hitting an enormous animal. And you see children riding horseback without any saddle, stirrups, or reins. So these skills required by herders utilized in conflict were just unbeatable. So the Chinese decided what they wanted to avoid and what they were good at. They had a lot of people. They had Iron Age tools, iron tools from the Iron Age, which occurred fairly early in China. And they had the tradition of building walls around all their settlements. So they just changed the shape from being an enclosing wall to a wall of linear shape and of extraordinary length. And the simple reason is, when you stand on a wall, you're higher than your enemy. In the era of cold weapons warfare, whatever you throw or shoot is going to go further and faster because you have gravity on your side. So you are adhering to the principle of cold weapons warfare laid down in the art of war, you know, Sun Tzu Bing Fa. Occupy the high ground and wait for the enemy to approach you. And even on flat land, if you build a wall, you're getting that 7 or 8 meter height advantage, greater range. And in the mountains, the wall is basically a death trap. So, were there any battles, major battles in front of the wall? And the answer is no. No. Yeah, it's an annihilation zone. Yeah. 2 miles of ground in front of the wall was kept clear of all vegetation. Round about 2 miles, a mile away, caltrops, metal spikes, were scattered in the grass to lame horses. As the approaches up the mountain narrowed, yeah, they planted landmines, automatically detonating landmines. The Chinese discovered the explosive formula of gunpowder from around about 1040. And then close to the wall, you have the killing zone, the range of the archers and the crossbowmen up at the ramparts, arcing the trajectory of their missile, going so much further, so much faster. Even the best archers, the nomads, down in the gullies, they couldn't match that because they're going against gravity. So that's what it's all about. Thank you. Good question.
Thank you very much for your questions. Let's give William one more round of applause.
Thank you, folks. I'd just like to say a very big thank you to Stephen, who's been a great supporter of everything I've done in China, and it's so great to reconnect these last couple of weeks here in New York, and for Stephen's help in arranging this talk, and for all of you coming here tonight. I believe summer is coming. You're going to have a break. As they say in Norway, have a good summer. And I do hope you will perhaps think of getting on a plane and coming to China and discovering many of its wonders. You will not be disappointed, and you will be enthralled by your Great Wall experience. Thank you.
My brother-in-law.
Oh, good.
So if I ever come up here, I'm going to call you up first.